Hi guys, Trevor Swenson with Through the Darkness, a journey through my story with PTSD in hopes of encouraging and giving a route of healing and knowledge and ultimate recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma and stress disorder. Today I want to talk about the topic of my trauma is not your trauma, and your trauma is not my trauma. And I want to start out by talking about what I knew about PTSD and what probably a lot of people think of PTSD if you were to ask them if they haven't had firsthand experience with it. And the first thing that came to mind when I was diagnosed with PTSD is I thought this only happened in the military and first responder and violent physical or sexual abuse situations. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And my passion and my purpose is to talk openly about my journey and my recovery and my treatment and things that I've learned in hopes of encouraging others that may have undiagnosed trauma, may be in the middle of being diagnosed or are diagnosed and are battling it like I am as well. That is really what I'm passionate about. And I feel like there is a lot of unresolved trauma in the world today in people's lives, and it can take a lot of different forms that people may not be aware of. And the most concerning thing to me is that it will manifest itself, in my opinion, in some way in your life, and unfortunately in the lives of others around you, unless you have the courage and the transparency and the honesty to address it and to face it with courage and with boldness, because it is a very real thing. It is a very damaging thing, and it's real. PTSD is very real, and unlike a physical injury that you can see, PTSD, you can't see it. And I will tell you that even people around me, including my immediate family, they could see the results of it, but they could not see the full story of what was going on inside me. And I want to use today's talk to maybe help you to dig a little bit deeper and maybe get to some answers, and ultimately to point you to professional help in processing the trauma that might be in your life. The first thing I'm going to ask of you is that you be completely transparent and honest with yourself, and next with somebody that is very close to you that loves you, and next with professionals. This is something that it's very difficult to be transparent about our brokenness, which is one of the reasons that it's scary for me to do this project, to have put all of this work into the material, because it is a very scary thing, and it's a very humbling thing, and it's difficult to talk about brokenness. But I also am of the belief that our brokenness is where within our brokenness is where the greatest healing and the greatest miracles and the greatest turnarounds and the greatest purpose comes from. So I want to talk about the many faces of trauma, and they may not mean much to you personally, but some of the things I go through may strike at the very root of where your unresolved trauma or your actual diagnosed trauma, where its root is. Obviously, first and foremost, we think of our service people and the combat arena and the military service and our first responders, and we think of sexual abuse, we think of physical abuse, things that are very threatening and very intense for a very short amount of time and very damaging to our mental capacity and our soul. Those things I think are talked about a lot more nowadays. But I also want to talk about things like death. Death can be very, very traumatic, even though it's a natural part of life. It can be very traumatic to people. And again, there are people that can be around death a lot, and they're around death all the time, and it doesn't affect them to the same level that it may affect you. And more than anything, as I go through this list, is it's okay. Your trauma is your trauma. Nobody else can determine or define what is traumatic to you other than you. And it's okay. I want to strip away the stigma of trauma and make it something that we can talk about openly. Narcissistic abuse is one that is out there that I really challenge you to look into and to read about and to study and to see how truly damaging it is in relationships, whether that relationship be a significant other or a parent or a supervisor or anybody that you have a relationship with. Narcissistic abuse is incredibly damaging with its gaslighting, with its manipulation, with its love bombing. All of these things that come with narcissistic abuse are incredibly traumatic to the soul. We were not meant to be controlled. We were meant to have a free will and to love and to edify and to build up and to be the best person that we were created to be for other people in hopes of making them better and stronger and better overall as human beings. Parents play a big role in unresolved trauma. A lot of people under the sound of my voice right now were not fortunate enough to have what is represented in God our Father as a fatherly figure in their life. Love, compassion, support, discipline, speaking words of edification, building up, pouring themselves into us, sacrificing for us, and ultimately loving us. And the same goes for mothers. We were wired to receive, especially as children and adults, to have that parent figure in our life that mirrors who God the Father is, who Christ is. And when that doesn't happen, it can be very, very traumatic. And a lot of the unresolved trauma, because you don't know any better, because you've never had a fatherly figure or a motherly figure that mirrors what God intended it to look like, it can go unresolved, and it can affect you for years with you not knowing specifically that is where its root cause is. I think about illnesses, serious illnesses as well, illnesses that maybe push you to the very brink of, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. There are people that are sick quite often or are gravely ill with a sickness that go about their life as if nothing has changed. That may not be you, and that may be the case for some people, but if it's not for you, it's okay. Remember, your trauma is your trauma, and the key is to address it. The key is to talk about it. The key is to reach out for help and to start healing that wound. Finances, financial calamity can be incredibly traumatic. There are people that have gone through multiple financial tragedies that are not affected in the long run because of it. And there are people that it completely wrecks them and ruins them as a person from the inside out. And that can be traumatic as well. Bullying. Bullying is one of the most straightforward things that can happen to somebody that if it goes unresolved, it will manifest itself in some way, either in how you treat people or how you treat yourself. Which brings me to a very important point in my talk today, is that it is of my belief, and again, I'm not a doctor, a counselor, or a psychiatrist, but it is from my life experience that the effects of trauma, if unresolved, if undiagnosed, if not treated, if not talked through, if not processed, will manifest itself in one of two ways. It'll either manifest itself in how you treat others or how you treat yourself, and it most likely won't be for the better. It will work itself out either through the hurting of other people, living your trauma over, through, onto, into other people, or your own self-worth, both of which there is so much more to life than to live a life where you struggle with that, not only for yourself, but also for the good of others. It is no fault of your own that you went through the traumatic event or events. No fault of your own. And it is no fault of your own in how it affected you either. And I want you to hear that loud and clear. But it is your responsibility, 100% your responsibility, to make sure that you get well, that you process those things that have been so damaging in your life, whether it be a bad relationship, a terrible work experience, a near-death experience, an accident, an illness, a divorce, whatever it might be. It may not be your fault at all. The trauma and stressor disorder and PTSD is not your fault. It is not your fault. But it is your responsibility to get help and to search for the greater purpose in all of it, in which I can tell you that in sitting here today, I can tell you that my journey has been a result of enormous grace. I should not be here for a lot of different reasons, whether it be my chemical dependency, whether it be my suicidal thoughts, whether it be the dumb things that I did to get that high rush of adrenaline that my body so deeply longed for again. But my purpose is shrouded in the grace that I was shown and that I was given, and I want to give you hope, and I want to know in my heart that I did my part in asking people to ask themselves the honest, deep questions. What is very, very injuring to me? And again, as the SEALs like to ask the question, are you hurt or are you injured? There's a big difference. There are a lot of hurtful things that we deal with on a very regular basis as human beings. PTSD is not having your feelings hurt. Trauma and stressor disorder is not having your feelings hurt or having a bad day. It is an injury that deserves the same professional attention as any serious physical injury would require. And my concern is that people are not doing that, and in turn they are hurting not only those around them, their family members, their kids, their co-workers, their neighbors, their loved ones, their friends, but they're hurting themselves. And I want to make sure that you have the courage and that shove from me to start dealing with the traumatic things in your life that are not simply hurtful, but that they were injuring. I want you to bring them into the light. I want you to put them at the very, very forefront, so the damage that they have been done can be addressed point by point by point, as I've gone through in past episodes, how it manifests itself in my life and almost took my own life and should have taken my own life in this whole process. Yet I will tell you by the grace of God that I sit here in front of you today, and that same grace is surrounding you as well, whether you know it or not. His grace is sufficient for you, and you simply need to ask him to be part of the process. Ask Christ to come in and be part of the process, and he absolutely will move on your behalf, and you will see purpose in your pain. I will tell you that the processing of your trauma is a very scary thing. I'm going to talk about EMDR as one of the processes that I went through, that it's really scary bringing it to the forefront, because probably over the years you have tamped it down, you have hidden it, you have shrouded it in chemicals. It has been shrouded by anxiety and depression. It has been shrouded in fear. Bringing it to the forefront is scary and is hurtful, but it's very, very necessary. When you think of any physical injury, it has to be dealt with or it's not going to heal correctly. The same as with PTSD. My turnaround came in when I took those very humiliating first steps to get help from professionals instead of trying to process it on my own. We as broken people have only so much capacity. God has all of the capacity. God created great professionals to help you out, and I ask you to ask both of them into your particular process. Remember that your trauma is your trauma. How dare anybody ever try to describe what is traumatic to you and what shouldn't be traumatic to you. I'll leave you with this short story to give you a little bit of an example. Downstairs in our home, I have a 6-foot rattlesnake mounted on an 8-foot long piece of oak. I killed that rattlesnake, which is a huge rattlesnake if you know anything about rattlesnakes, by myself in the dark in the wilds of Montana. To a lot of people, that would be an extremely traumatic event or circumstance. Yet to me, I got a kick out of it. In fact, I went on to kill quite a few rattlesnakes for ranchers on the ranches that I worked on for a period of time, and I enjoyed it. But I could also see the absolute fear and the absolute trauma on people's faces when they were with me when I would be doing this. And it's a very superficial, very quick example of your trauma is your trauma, my trauma is my trauma, and nobody can name my trauma except for me. Nobody can name your trauma except for you. I hope these words have been encouraging to you and have been another piece of the puzzle for you in walking through trauma and stressor disorder. Forward this message to somebody that you think might be hurt by some of the things that I talked about. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button. I'll have lots more information about my journey. I'm putting myself out there in love and in transparency and in purpose, because I know we live in a broken and hurting world, and we need more people to join the conversation in removing the stigma and removing the stereotypes that come along with PTSD and trauma and stressor disorder. There is hope. We are simply moving through the darkness. We are not standing in it. We're not setting up camp in it. We are moving through it to a brighter, better set of days ahead. Thanks for being with me today. Thanks for allowing me to be with you. We'll see you next time.